Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. From his clothes to his table manners, Brin always seems to find something to nitpick. In recent times, Darla, her mother, has also been visiting more frequently, each time with pointed comments about Andrew's shortcomings. Those secret calls, which always ended abruptly as he approached, heightened the suspicion in Andrew's mind. One night, Andrew returns early from a local delivery assignment to find Brin on the phone in their bedroom. "I can't talk about it now," she said, hanging up quickly as soon as she saw him. "Who was that just now?" Andrew asked as he put down his car keys. "It's just the gallery," Brin replied too quickly. At 9 p.m., the art gallery wasn't open. Andrew thought to himself. She stood up. "Why are you back so early?" "The job is done," he said, scrutinizing her face. "Are you waiting for someone else?" Brin's expression hardened. "What do you mean by that?" "You tell me." Andrew leaned against the doorframe. "If there's something you want to say, just say it." "I think," Andrew paused, his voice low and clear, "that you cheated." The accusation was like a heavy stone thrown into a calm lake, sending silent ripples between the two men. Brin's face flushed, then turned pale. "How dare you say that?" she hissed in a low voice. "Am I wrong?" Andrew asked rhetorically. Instead of answering directly, Brin turned defensive. "That's ridiculous coming from you. Going away for weeks at a time, staying in motels all over the country. Who knows what you do on the road?" Andrew didn't take the bait. "I drive, Brin. I sleep, and then proceed to drive. I call you every night. And I'm supposed to believe that? Men like you. Men like me." Andrew's voice held its composure. "What the hell does that mean?" Brin was momentarily speechless, but quickly perked up. "You know what? I don't want to have this conversation. You want to accuse me out of thin air, be my guest. Go sleep in the guest room. It's my house too," Andrew reminded her. "Not for long," Brin snapped, but as soon as the words left her mouth, she immediately showed regret. Andrew nodded slowly. "So it is." "Andrew, I didn't mean that." "No, you did." He turned to leave and stopped again. "But remember, Brin, I'm not as simple as you think." That night, Andrew called Jude from the guest room. "Things happen. As soon as my friend picked up the phone, he got right to the point." "Are you sure?" She basically admitted it. "And I think there's someone else." Jude cursed under his breath. "What's next?" "I need you to load something in my truck. And I need to meet with Miguel soon." "What are you thinking, Andrew?" "I'm thinking," Andrew replied, "that it's time to read those fine print clauses carefully. Make sure I'm the one who ends up with the contract." 3 days later, Brin served him with divorce papers, citing emotional abandonment and irreconcilable differences. The next morning, she moved in with her mother, Darla. What she didn't know was that Andrew had anticipated this step and had been preparing for it. The Portland County Courthouse was abuzz with people as Andrew entered the stately building. He straightened his tie, a simple blue tie, not one of those designer brands Brin had been trying to foist on him, and glanced at his watch, timing it just right. Outside courtroom 3B, he saw Jude, dressed in his formal clothes, a clean button-down shirt, and his only pair of non-work jeans. "Ready?" Jude asked, tapping Andrew on the shoulder. "It's been ready for a long time," Andrew replied. They walked into the courtroom together. Andrew saw Brin immediately, sitting in the front row with her lawyer, who looked pie-eyed and dressed in a well-tailored suit. Darla was sitting directly behind them and was whispering something into Brin's ear. All three men looked up as Andrew walked in, a mixture of contempt and confidence on their faces. Andrew takes a seat at the table across the room where Miguel Espina is already waiting. Jude's cousin agreed to represent him as a favor for a nominal fee. Miguel may not have a glamorous resume, but he makes up for it with meticulous preparation and legal savvy. "They look smug," Miguel whispered. "Let them be smug," Andrew replied. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Regina Martinez walked in. She was an unsmiling woman in her 60s, scrutinizing the papers in front of her with a neutral expression. "Holloway Wade's preliminary divorce action against Wade," she announced. "I understand the petitioner is seeking a speedy judgment." Brin's attorney stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm James Whitfield, representing Brin Holloway Wade. We request immediate asset division and spousal support payments while the lawsuit is pending. My client has been financially dependent on her husband during the marriage and needs immediate support." Judge Martinez nodded and looked the other way. "The defense." Miguel rose. "Miguel Espina, for Andrew Wade." "Your Honor, We take issue with both the description of the nature of the marriage and the request for emergency alimony. The judge pushed up his glasses. Very well. Ms. Holloway Wade, please come to the witness stand. Brin walks gracefully to the witness stand, playing the aggrieved role in a conservative navy blue dress. After taking her vows, she gathered her emotions in a practiced gesture of vulnerability. Whitfield began the questioning. Mrs. Holloway Wade, can you describe your marriage to the defendant? We've been married for 5 years, Brin replied, his voice soft but clear. It was good at first. I thought Andrew had potential. But as time went on, he became more and more distant. His work takes him away for weeks at a time, leaving me alone to maintain our home and social responsibilities. How does this affect you? Brin wiped the corners of his eyes with a tissue. I felt abandoned and isolated. Despite the network of connections my family could provide, Andrew refused to consider a more suitable career. He'd rather live in motels and truck stops than build a decent life with me. Andrew, who was sitting in his seat, watched her performance with an expressionless face, which was completely expected. Does Mr. Wade provide financial support for your family? Whitfield continued to ask. He pays the bills, Brin admits, but he controls all our finances. I have to ask him for money to buy even basic necessities. This is so humiliating. Andrew raised an eyebrow, but stayed silent. Miguel took notes. Then why are you seeking emergency alimony? I had to move in with my mother. I have no independent income. The gallery I work at is nonprofit, and I volunteer there. Andrew knows this, but he froze our joint account. No further questions, Your Honor. Whitfield closed the floor for questions. Judge Martinez looks to Miguel. Cross-examination, Mr. Espina? Miguel approached the witness stand. Mrs. Holloway Wade, you said you volunteer at an art gallery. Is that correct? Yes, the West End Modern Art Co-op. I'm the curator. And who started this gallery? Brin moved slightly. It was established by my mother as part of the Holloway Foundation's community outreach program. I understand. So who are the board members of the Holloway Foundation? My mother is the president. I serve as secretary. Does the foundation pay you for your services? This is a volunteer position. Brin insisted. Miguel nodded, checking his notes. Mrs. Holloway Wade, did you complete a master's degree during your marriage to my client? Yes, fine arts major. Who paid for that tuition? Brin hesitated. Andrew. Contributed to my education, yes. Is it contribution or full payment? Tuition totals $63,000 for 2 years, right? Approximately. Yes. And did you have a checking account at First National Bank during the marriage? Brin was confused by the sudden shift. Yes. What is the average monthly balance? I don't remember much. Miguel filed a document with the judge and Whitfield. Your Honor, these are bank statements for accounts opened solely in the name of Mrs. Holloway Wade. You will note that the average balance over the last 3 years has been about $30,000. Whitfield stood. Objection. These documents were not provided during the discovery phase. They are contained in Annex C, Mr. Counselor, Miguel replied calmly. Page 47. The judge reviewed the documents. Objection overruled. The witness must answer. Brin looked a little flustered. That's my personal account. There's $30,000 in there. Miguel confirmed. But you testified that you have no independent income and must ask your husband for basic living expenses? Those funds are for emergencies. Brin argued. Such as an emergency like your divorce? Miguel asked gently. Mrs. Holloway Wade, do you still hold a credit card in your name? Yes, but has a credit limit of $50,000 and currently owes about $23,000 on purchases at Nordstrom, Saks Fifth Avenue, and a couple luxury hotels? $000. Brin's composure begins to crack. I have to maintain a certain level in order to keep up appearances. Sure. One last question. Who pays the payments on this credit card? Brin's eyes glanced over to Darla, who was watching her with a tense expression. It's Andrew. Thanks. No further questions. When Brin returns to her seat, Andrew notices that she is angrily whispering something to Whitfield, who looks increasingly worried. The judge turned to Andrew's table. Mr. Wade, please take the witness stand. Andrew was sworn in with a calm and direct demeanor. Miguel began the question. Mr. Wade, what do you do for a living? I own Wade Logistics, Andrew replied. We are a professional transportation company with 16 trucks and 23 employees. I started as a driver 15 years ago and started this company from nothing. What is your approximate annual income? About $220,000, depending on the contract. How were finances handled during your marriage to Brin Holloway Wade? Andrew leaned forward slightly. We maintain joint accounts for household expenses and investments. Brin also maintains her personal account, into which I deposit $5,000 per month for her discretionary use. I pay all the household bills, her credit card bills, her education, and provided $100,000 for her to set up an art studio. Have you ever refused Mrs. Holloway Wade access to funds? Never. She has full access to our joint account and her own separate funds. Miguel nodded. Mr. Wade, Mrs. Holloway Wade described you as living in motels and truck stops. Can you explain? I'm on the road about 180 days a year, Andrew explains, and my company specializes in high-value, time-sensitive shipments that require the owner to be physically present. When I'm driving, I'll stay in pre-arranged accommodations along the established route. It's a professional routine, not a lifestyle choice. What about when you're not driving? I manage the business from home and maintain our family. Miguel stepped forward with a document. Your Honor, I would like to submit this as evidence. What's this, Counselor? Judge Martinez asked. A postnuptial agreement signed by both parties 3 years ago. Across the courtroom, Andrew saw Brin's face turn instantly white. Whitfield fumbled through his notes. Objection! Whitfield shouted. No postnuptial agreement was disclosed in the preliminary documents. Miguel remained calm and collected. Your Honor, the agreement was filed in the county recorder's office 3 years ago. It's a matter of public record. We also referred to it in our response to the application, paragraph 17. The judge examined the documents. Objection overruled. Mr. Espina, please continue. Miguel turned back to Andrew. Can you explain the circumstances surrounding the signing of this agreement? Andrew nodded. After 3 years of marriage, Brin expressed concern about protecting her trust fund and future legacy. She asked for a post-nuptial agreement to ensure that her family assets remained separate property. You agree? Yes, but with a few conditions of my own. What are those conditions? Andrew's eyes briefly met Brin's across the courtroom. That is, any marital assets I brought into the marriage or acquired through my business remain mine in the event of a divorce. And if either party engages in extramarital affairs or financial misconduct, the claim to joint marital property will be waived. Whitfield stood again. Your Honor, my client did not have adequate legal representation when he signed this agreement. We question its validity. Miguel held up the last page of the document. The agreement was prepared by the law firm of Sutton and Myers and witnessed by a notary public. Mrs. Holloway Wade's signature is next to that of her then attorney, Rebecca Sutton. The judge examined the documents, and the agreement appears to have been properly executed. Mr. Whitfield, your objection is noted for the record, but overruled. Andrew watched as Brin leaned over and eagerly whispered to her lawyer, and Darla's face had stiffened like stone. Miguel continued, Mr. Wade, Mrs. Holloway Wade described you as controlling and absent. How would you describe your marriage? Andrew thought for a moment and then replied, I believe we are a partnership. There are different strengths, different interests, but partnerships. I support Brin's educational and career goals without question. I accepted her family's reservations about me. I'm trying to build a life that will satisfy both of us. And when did you realize that this was not the case? About 6 months ago. I began to notice changes, secret phone calls, unexplained absences, critical comments about my career, my clothes, my friends. Then I overheard Brin and her mother discussing plans to, in their words, free her from this experiment. Whitfield stood up again and objection. Hearsay. The objection is sustained, ruled the judge, and the jury will disregard that last sentence. Note, the word jury is in the original text, but in the United States, where divorce cases are usually decided by a judge, a slight adjustment has been made to conform to the court's procedures and to preserve its intent. Miguel fluidly adjusted the conversation. Mr. Wade, do you believe your wife has been faithful to you during your marriage? Brin was visibly nervous. No, Andrew said firmly, I don't believe it. On what basis do you make this judgment? Andrew's expression stayed neutral. The phone records show hundreds of calls and texts to a number belonging to Nolan Pfizer, who is her personal trainer, and the calls are often late at night or when I'm out of town on business. The hotel bill on her credit card, dated to match the time she claimed to have attended the art conference, and photos taken by licensed investigators showing them together at a vacation rental in Cannon Beach 3 months ago. The courtroom was abuzz with talk. Whitfield looked caught off guard. Brin's face was a mixture of shock and anger, almost breaking down. Darla sat stiffly, her knuckles whitening as she squeezed her designer handbag. Miguel handed the judge a folder. "Your Honor, these are the phone records, credit card bills, and investigators' report that my client mentioned." Judge Martinez reviewed the documents, his frown deepening. "There seems to be no problem with these documents. Mr. Espina, please continue." "Mr. Wade, given these circumstances, what do you expect to get out of this lawsuit?" Andrew sat up straight. "I'm asking to enforce our post-nuptial agreement. By its terms, Brin's infidelity deprived her of her right to claim community property and additional alimony. No further questions, Your Honor." Whitfield walks up for cross-examination, visibly flustered. "Mr. Wade, you travel a lot for work, correct?" "Yes." "Who was able to verify your whereabouts or activities during these extended absences?" Andrew immediately understood his intentions. "My truck is equipped with a GPS tracking system as required by the Department of Transportation. My routes, stops, and hours worked are electronically recorded and submitted to regulatory agencies. That only confirms the location of your truck, not yourself." Whitfield is in hot pursuit. "I'm also the only authorized driver of my vehicle," Andrew replied. "And last year I installed a cockpit camera system for safety reasons. The footage is stored on a secure server." Whitfield paused to reorganize his thoughts. "You mentioned this post-nuptial agreement. Is it not convenient that it contains terms so favorable to you in the present case?" "The terms apply equally to both parties," Andrew points out. "And if I engage in infidelity or financial misconduct, I am penalized in the same way. You expect the court to believe that it was you who proposed these specific terms 3 years ago, somehow anticipating what is happening now." Andrew met him with a firm gaze. "I propose these terms because I believe there should be consequences for broken promises, Mr. Whitfield. I didn't foresee anything. I just set the boundaries." Whitfield tries another tactic. "Are you resentful because you are jealous of Mrs. Holloway Wade's family wealth and social standing?" "No. I respect her background, but I'm not interested in pretending to be someone I'm not. But you have always refused to advance yourself socially or professionally through her family's connections. I prefer to succeed on my own merits." Andrew replied simply. Frustrated, Whitfield switches tactics again. "Let's talk about your alleged evidence of an extramarital affair. You hired a private investigator to follow your wife. After I found overwhelming evidence of an extramarital affair, yes. Some might call it an invasion of privacy and controlling behavior." Andrew doesn't flinch. "Some people may also claim that having an extramarital affair is an invasion of privacy and controlling behavior." A few soft chuckles came from the gallery. The judge gently banged his gavel. "No further questions." Whitfield abruptly ended the inquiry. Judge Martinez adjourned the hearing for 1 hour. People were walking out of the courtroom one by one, and Andrew remained in his seat, watching Brin huddled with her lawyer and mother. Darla's expression is grim as she gestures pointedly while whispering a reprimand to Whitfield. "You did well," Miguel said calmly. "They didn't expect any of this at all." "They underestimated me," Andrew replied. "They always do." During the recess, Andrew stepped outside to get some air. He stopped at a quiet corner of the courthouse steps and took a moment to gather his thoughts. The morning court session went as planned, but he knew the real battle was ahead. "Andrew." He turned to find Brin standing a few feet away. She took off her suit jacket, and he noticed that her hands were trembling slightly. "What do you want, Brin?" She looked around to make sure no one had heard. "We need to talk. This doesn't have to get ugly." "It was already ugly, Brin," Andrew pointed out. "You're the one who made it ugly when you decided to betray me and then tried to take away everything I'd built." "It's not that." She protested weakly. "What's that like? Explain it to me." There was no anger in his tone, only matter-of-factness. Brin hesitated. "I'm not happy. You're always away. We wanted something different." "Then you should have been honest about filing for divorce in the first place, instead of you and Darla plotting behind my back. You lied. You cheated. You tried to humiliate me." "Mom." She's very persuasive. Andrew shook his head. Don't blame Darla. You're an adult, Brin. You made your choice. So now what? You humiliated me in court and ruined my reputation. Is that what you wanted? What I want, Andrew said calmly, is a wife who respects me. But we're past that stage. We could settle this privately, Brin suggested, lowering his voice. Come to an agreement. Like the one you arranged with your mother kind of thing, where I lose everything and dust myself off. Brin blushed. No, that's exactly what you planned, Andrew interrupted her. That night at her house, I heard you and Darla talking. By this time next year, you'll be free of this experiment. Remember saying that. Brin's expression confirmed his words. What happens next, I'll tell you, Andrew continued calmly, is that we'll be back in that courtroom. The judge will review our postnuptial agreement and all the evidence. And then you'll walk away with everything you brought into this marriage or trust fund, your family connections, and your false sense of superiority. You can't do that, Brin whispered. I already did. Andrew looked at his watch. The recess is almost over. You'd better touch up your makeup before you go back. I thought you cared about image, remember? He walked past her toward the courthouse doors. Behind him, he heard her suppressed sobs, but he didn't turn around. When the hearing resumed, Judge Martinez told the parties, after reviewing the evidence presented, I find the postnuptial agreement valid and enforceable. Mr. Whitfield, do you have any other witnesses? Whitfield stood up. Your Honor, we would like to subpoena Darla Holloway. Darla took the witness stand, elegant and composed in her expensive suit. After taking her vows, she sat down in perfect posture, her hands folded in her lap. Ms. Holloway, Whitfield began the question, can you describe your observations of your daughter's marriage to Mr. Wade? Darla's voice was educated and precise. I had concerns from the beginning. Andrew never seemed interested in fitting in with our family or social circle. Despite the opportunity to move up, he's kept that blue-collar status. How does this affect your daughter? Brin tried very hard to keep the marriage together, Darla said, overflowing with sympathy for her daughter. She supported his freight business, put up with his long absences, and even defended him when friends questioned her choice of husband. Did you witness any controlling behavior by Mr. Wade? Darla nodded solemnly. He insists on managing their finances. He refused to attend important social and charitable events. He isolates Brin from her natural peer group by maintaining a lifestyle that is below her origins. Andrew looked at her calmly. Darla played the part well, sincere, concerned, and careful not to overdo it. Thank you, Ms. Holloway, Whitfield concluded. No further questions. Miguel stepped forward for cross-examination. Ms. Holloway, how often do you visit your daughter and Mr. Wade at their home? Often go. Go every week if possible. During those visits, did you observe Mr. Wade verbally or physically abusing your daughter? Darla hesitated. Not in the traditional sense, no. Have you seen him stop her from spending money, seeing friends, or pursuing her interests? His control over her is more subtle. Please answer the question directly, Miguel emphasized. Did you witness Mr. Wade preventing your daughter from spending money, seeing friends, or pursuing her interests? No, Darla admitted reluctantly. Miguel nodded. Ms. Holloway, you are the president of the Holloway Foundation, correct? Darla was surprised at the change of subject. Yes, it's been 15 years. This foundation is a charitable organization that enjoys tax exemption? Sure. Can you explain the foundation's relationship with Green Path Logistics, GPL? A crack appeared in Darla's calm facade. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Miguel handed her a document. This is the IRS 990 form that the Holloway Foundation filed 3 years ago. It shows approximately $450,000 paid to Green Trail Logistics for transportation services. Yes, they assisted in the distribution of charity supplies. Darla replied as she regained her composure. Ms. Holloway, are you aware that Green Path Logistics was incorporated only 2 weeks prior to receiving this contract? Its listed business address is a virtual office in Delaware with no physical presence. The courtroom became quiet. Darla's fingers tightened on the file. I don't manage the day-to-day operations, she said stiffly. Miguel relentlessly pressed on. Are you also aware that the registered agent for Green Path Logistics is Robert Chambers, who is both your personal attorney and legal counsel for the Holloway Foundation? Objection, Whitfield shouted, irrelevant to the case. I'm demonstrating a pattern of financial irregularities, Your Honor, Miguel explained, that are directly related to the credibility of Ms. Holloway's testimony about Mr. Wade's character and financial management. I allow, Judge Martinez ruled, that the witness must answer. Darla's voice was tight. Robert represents a lot of clients. I don't know every entity he represents. Last question, Miguel said. Ms. Holloway, did you use Mr. Wade's social security number to open a bank account for Greenpath Logistics without his knowledge or consent? The courtroom was silent. Darla's face turned pale. This is ridiculous, she whispered. Miguel handed the judge another document. Your Honor, this is a bank statement for an account at FUR Security Bank in the name of Green Trail Logistics using Andrew Wade's social security number, but the only signer is Darla Holloway. Mr. Wade discovered this last year when he checked his credit report. Judge Martinez examined the documents with a furrowed brow. Ms. Holloway, are you aware that the use of a person's social security number for financial activity without their consent constitutes identity theft? Darla looks genuinely alarmed now. There must be some kind of misunderstanding. I would never, Your Honor, Miguel interrupted. We have other documents that show that there was a systematic misuse of Mr. Wade's personal information in his establishing lines of credit and business entities without his knowledge. We believe these activities constitute both identity theft and possibly tax fraud. Whitfield stood. Your Honor, these allegations are beyond the scope of this proceeding. If Mr. Espina has evidence of criminal activity, he should present it to the proper authorities. It's been filed, Miguel replied calmly, and all relevant documents have been provided to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. Darla stood up slightly from the witness stand. This is too much. I came here to support my daughter, not to be accused. Sit down, Ms. Holloway. Judge Martinez ordered sternly. Mr. Espina, while I appreciate your thoroughness, please limit your questions to matters directly related to the divorce proceedings. Of course, Your Honor. Miguel turned back to Darla. Ms. Holloway, given that you appear to have used Mr. Wade's personal information to commit identity theft, do you believe that you have a bias against him that may influence your testimony today? Darla's composure completely crumbled. It's a trap, she hissed. He was nothing before he married my daughter. Nothing. No further questions, Miguel said, returning to his seat. Whitfield waived the opportunity to ask another question, and Darla was allowed to leave the witness stand. She was visibly shaking as she returned to her seat. Judge Martinez called for closing arguments. Whitfield spoke first, trying to save his case. He emphasized Brin's contributions to the marriage, questioned the timeliness of Andrew's evidence, and attempted to separate Darla's alleged financial misconduct from Brin's divorce petition. When Miguel got up to make his closing argument, his approach was methodical and deadly. Your Honor, this case is fundamentally about honesty and consequences. Mr. Wade entered into the marriage in good faith. He worked hard, gave generously, and kept his promises. In return, Mrs. Holloway Wade has an extramarital affair while she and her mother conspire to extract maximum financial benefit from a marriage they both regard as temporary and demeaning. He held up the postnuptial agreement, a document that, on Mrs. Holloway Wade's own initiative, spells out the consequences of infidelity and financial misconduct. The evidence on both counts is overwhelming and irrefutable. He points to Andrew. Mr. Wade is not seeking revenge. He is simply asking to execute an agreement that Mrs. Holloway Wade voluntarily signed with adequate legal representation. He wants to keep the business he built before and during the marriage, keep the property he largely financed, and get on with his life. Miguel glanced at Brin and Darla. Perhaps the most telling point about this case is that Mrs. Holloway Wade and her mother have always underestimated Mr. Wade. They see his profession as inferior, his intellect as limited, his resources as unimpressive. They fail to recognize that integrity and hard work are qualities that are vital in business, in marriage, and in the courtroom. He turned back to the judge. We ask that you enforce the postnuptial agreement in accordance with its terms, deny the request for spousal support, and award Mr. Wade reasonable attorney's fees in accordance with the terms of the agreement. Thanks. Judge Martinez called another short recess to review the notes. During the wait, Andrew sat quietly next to Miguel and watched as Brin and Darla had a heated discussion with Whitfield. That lawyer looked increasingly frustrated. When the judge returned, She had a serious look on her face. Having reviewed all of the evidence and arguments presented, I make the following findings. First, the postnuptial agreement between Andrew Wade and Brin Holloway Wade is valid and enforceable. Second, there was clear and convincing evidence that Mrs. Holloway Wade had an extramarital relationship in violation of the agreement. Third, there is substantial evidence that Darla Holloway was involved in financial misconduct using Mr. Wade's personal information. She looked directly at Brin. Therefore, under the terms of the postnuptial agreement, Mrs. Holloway Wade forfeits her claim to any joint marital property, including the family home and Mr. Wade's business interests. Her request for spousal support is denied. The judge turned to Darla. Ms. Holloway, although you are not a formal party to this proceeding, you should be aware that I will be referring evidence involving identity theft and potential tax fraud to the district attorney's office for review. I recommend that you retain independent legal counsel immediately. Finally, she told the parties, Mr. Wade is ordered to be awarded reasonable attorney's fees under the terms of the agreement. This court grants the petition for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences, effective immediately. Any more questions? Whitfield stood up weakly. Your Honor, we intend to appeal. That is your right, Counselor, interrupted the judge. But note that appeals based on evidence that was available at the time of the trial but not presented are rarely successful. This case is closed. With the final fall of the gavel, Judge Martinez left the courtroom. For a moment, no one moved. Then Brin jolted to his feet and stormed out of the courtroom in tears. Darla followed her, her earlier composure gone. Whitfield gathered his papers in frustration. Andrew sat quietly, digesting the results. Everything was as he expected, but he felt no joy of victory, only a deep exhaustion. Jude came over from the gallery and patted him on the shoulder. It's over, bro. Andrew nodded and slowly stood up. It's over. As they left the courtroom, Andrew looked back at the empty witness stand where he finally told the truth. The 5 years of his life were reduced to exhibits and testimony. He turned and stepped into the afternoon sun, ready to leave the shadows behind. A week after the divorce decree was finalized, Andrew returned to the house, which was now entirely his, to find everything in it just as he had left it, except for Brin's personal belongings. She took her clothes, jewelry, and artwork, but left everything else behind. Obviously, there is no emotional attachment. He walked slowly through the rooms, noting the blank space on the wall where her picture had hung, the empty spot on the dresser where her perfume had been left, the half-empty closet. The house felt bigger, as if her absence created space rather than emptiness. In the kitchen, he found a lone wine glass in the sink. A parting gesture, perhaps? He washed it, dried it, and put it away. Then he opened his laptop and started searching for real estate agents. The house, despite being his legal victory, holds too many false memories. He wanted a fresh start. His phone rang, and Jude's name showed up on the screen. Hey. Andrew picked up the phone and set his laptop aside. Where are you? Jude asked as he opened the door. At home. Turn on the TV, Channel 8. Andrew found the remote and turned on the TV. The local news is showing a breaking story. Prominent philanthropist under investigation. Cameras show federal agents removing boxes of documents from Darla's mansion. A reporter stands in the foreground explaining that the Holloway Foundation is under investigation for alleged tax fraud, identity theft, and misappropriation of charitable funds. My God, Andrew whispered. There's more, Jude said. Keep watching. The screen switches to a brief statement from an IRS spokesperson. This investigation began with evidence that a charitable organization's tax-exempt status was systematically abused, including the creation of shell corporations to transfer funds for personal use. You knew this was coming? Andrew asked into the phone. Miguel mentioned that the IRS was taking their investigation seriously, but I didn't think it would be this fast. Andrew watched as cameras captured the moment Darla was escorted to a car, her face partially obscured by a designer scarf. No sign of Brin. What about Robert Chambers? Andrew remembers Darla's lawyer and co-conspirator. Also under investigation. Apparently, he's been cooperating with the authorities and pushing Darla out to save his own ass. Andrew turned off the TV. I didn't expect it to be such a big deal. You didn't cause it, Jude reminded him. You just revealed what was already there. Yeah, Andrew sighed, but regret it. Andrew considered this carefully. No, They made their choice. I did mine too. Hanging up the phone, Andrew returned to his laptop. There was no satisfaction in watching Darla's downfall, only a quiet certainty that justice sometimes comes of its own accord. 3 days later, Andrew was on the road again. The familiar weight of the truck was beneath him, and the open highway stretched out ahead, just the place he'd been looking for clarity of thought. His first stop was Jude's garage, where a group of men were gathered around a partially disassembled engine. Andrew, Jude spotted him and waved at him. "Meet the big guys," he said, gesturing to the men. Ex-Marines, trying to figure out the next way out. Andrew shook hands with each of them: Jim, Marcus, Dwayne, and Tony. Their handshake was strong, with a scrutinizing but respectful look in their eyes. "Jude says you run a freight company," Jim said. "That business is pretty lucrative." "It's okay," Andrew replied. "It would be better if you had your own truck. The work is hard and the hours are long, but on the road you're your own boss. These fellows need a little stability," Jude explains, "and the transition to civilian life isn't easy." Andrew surveyed the men more closely, noting their austere posture and their attention to detail as they worked on the engine. He recognized something in them, a sense of purpose seeking direction. "Ever considered a career in logistics?" he asked later over coffee in Jude's office. Andrew outlined his idea for a mentorship program. "We take in veterans, train them, help them get their commercial driver's licenses, and maybe eventually help them buy their own trucks." Jude leaned back in his chair. "That's a big commitment." "I have time now," Andrew says, "and the company is stable enough to expand." "What made you think of this?" Andrew pondered the question. "I spent 5 years living with someone who had no sense of value for the work I was doing. Maybe it's time to show others the opportunities I've found. This has nothing to do with needing something positive after everything." Jude asked knowingly. Andrew smiled slightly. "Maybe it has something to do with it too." Over the next month, Andrew developed a formal program. He worked with a veterans organization to secure some initial funding and developed a training program for veterans, including those he met at Jude's repair shop, who became the first participants. He also sold the large house, bought a smaller residence close to the company's headquarters, and resumed his regular route. The rhythm of the road has a healing effect, stretches of asphalt unfolding under the wheels, changing landscapes, being alone and not alone. He occasionally hears about Brin. She moved to Seattle and took a position at another gallery. No mention of Nolan, her coach. Darla's legal troubles continue to mount as investigators uncover more irregularities in the foundation's finances. Andrew followed the news with an out-of-the-way interest, like watching a storm sweep over distant hills. Their lives no longer intersected with him. Until 6 months later, when he flew to Miami for a business conference. Portland International Airport was packed that morning. Andrew checked his bags, went through security, and walked to his gate. As he passed a luxury car rental counter, he glanced over and froze. Brin stood behind the counter, her hair simply tied back in a ponytail, wearing a company uniform shirt. She was helping a customer, smiling professionally but looking a little tired. Despite the elaborate makeup, she looked thinner and a bit older. Andrew could have walked by unnoticed, could have pretended not to see her. But he stopped and waited for her to finish working on that customer. When she looked up and saw him, her face went through a cycle of shock, embarrassment, and resignation. "Andrew," she said softly. "Brin." He nodded, noting that the designer clothes and jewelry were no longer on her. "Working here now." She straightened up, a flash of her old pride flashing through. "Yes. Since the foundation's assets were frozen, I've had to make some adjustments." "I see." An awkward silence spread between them. "Darla," he finally asked. "House arrest at home, pending trial." Brin replied, his voice tight. The legal fees almost bankrupted her. Andrew nodded. "Where's Nolan?" A bitter smile swept across Brin's face. "Gone. Turns out he's more interested in the Holloway surname than he is in me." "I'm sorry to hear that," Andrew said, surprising even himself with the sincerity. Brin scrutinized his face. "Do you mean it?" "No one should be taken advantage of, Brin. Even you." She cringed slightly at his words. "I guess I deserve it." Another customer approached the counter, saving them from further conversation. "I should go." Andrew pointed in the direction of the gate. "Take care of yourself." As he turned to leave, Brin yelled after him, "Andrew." He looks back. "You look well," she said, "and happy." Andrew pondered for a moment. Yes, I am. He realized. Good luck, Brin. He walked away and could feel her eyes following him. He didn't look back again. On the airplane, Andrew thought back on the chance encounter. Brin has fallen far from her superior position, but somehow she seems more real now than she did during their marriage. The shell has cracked, revealing the person inside, flawed, struggling, human. He felt no satisfaction at her downfall, only a quiet certainty. He had escaped something toxic. The life she and Darla had planned for him, controlled, degraded, and ultimately abandoned, was no longer a threat. As the plane took off, Andrew watched Portland disappear under the clouds. New horizons await, business opportunities, veteran mentor programs, and perhaps finally a relationship based on mutual respect rather than social calculation. He was right that day in court. Brin and Darla have been underestimating him. They see only the surface, the rough hands, the worn boots, the blue-collar job, but miss what's on the inside. His intelligence, his patience, his ability to observe and learn, his determination not to be anyone's experiment, guinea pig for anyone. That truck cab, which Brin derided as his mobile home, did indeed become the command center for justice, a place where he documented the truth mile by lonely mile and prepared for the eventual reckoning. Andrew leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes as the plane flew smoothly above the clouds. The fine print clause is ultimately important, in contracts, in marriage, in life. Not only did he survive the betrayal, he buried it with asphalt, dignity, and an ironclad contract. Now he was sailing away from the ruins they had created, rebuilding his future mile by mile. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.